There are places, man, that just feel heavy, like the air itself is thick with old sorrow, old pain. Abandoned sanatoriums, the ones built way up in the mountains for fresh air and rest back in the day. They're definitely at the top of that list. I was doing a solo hike, a pretty ambitious multi-day trek through the more remote parts of the White Mountains, when I got caught in this insane, unseasonal fog. Came down out of nowhere, thick as soup. Visibility dropped to about 5 feet. My GPS weren't on the fritz. I was completely, utterly lost. And then, looming out of the mist like some gothic nightmare, I saw it. The skeletal silhouette of the old Crestview Sanatorium. I knew about Crestview, of course. Local legend, supposedly shut down in the 50s after some kind of scandal or outbreak, left to rot on its isolated mountaintop. Never planned on visiting it, especially not alone. But with the fog completely disorienting me, no idea which way was out, and night coming on fast, its crumbling stone walls looked like the only option for shelter. Okay, I muttered to myself, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, just for the night. Just until this fog lifts. The main doors were long gone, just a gaping dark hole. Stepped inside. The air was freezing, damp, and smelled overwhelmingly of mildew, decaying plaster, and something else. A faint, sharp, almost chemical scent, like old medicine or disinfectant that had never quite faded. My headlamp being cut through the gloom, revealing a vast, echoing lobby. Reception desk overturned, patient records scattered across the floor like fallen leaves, wallpaper peeling in huge, leprous strips. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water from the collapsing ceiling. I needed to find a relatively dry, sheltered spot to wait out the fog in the night. Started exploring, moving cautiously through the debris-strewn corridors. Past what were clearly old patient rooms, doors hanging off hinges, rusted bed frames still inside some. The feeling of sadness, of past suffering, was overwhelming. It wasn't scary in a jump scare kind of way, it was just profoundly depressing and incredibly creepy. As I went deeper into the building, looking for a less exposed area, I started noticing things that didn't quite fit the abandoned for 70 years narrative. In one long corridor, lined with what might have been private patient rooms, the dust on the floor seemed disturbed. Not just my footprints. Fainter scuff marks, like someone else had walked here recently? Or was it just the wind blowing dust around in weird patterns? Then I found a room at the end of a wing that was different. The door was closed, unlike most of the others, and it looked newer, or at least less decayed. Pushed it open. Inside, it was relatively clean. Someone had cleared a space on the floor. There was a newer-looking sleeping bag, neatly rolled up. A small camping stove. A few empty food cans. And on the wall, someone had pinned up a hand-drawn map of the sanatorium itself, with certain rooms or areas circled in red. My heart started pounding. I wasn't alone in this ruin. Someone was living here, or at least using it as a regular shelter. A hermit? A squatter? Or someone hiding out? The map, with its circled areas, felt particularly unsettling. What were they marking? I backed out of the room slowly, pulling the door almost shut. Suddenly, the sanatorium didn't feel just sad and decayed. It felt potentially dangerous. I needed to find my own spot far away from this one and stay quiet. I ended up in what looked like an old sunroom or common area. Large windows, mostly broken, but one corner relatively sheltered from the wind and dripping water. Unrolled my own sleeping bag, sat down, trying to be as silent as possible. The fog outside was still incredibly thick, pressing against the broken window panes like a living thing. That's when I started hearing the sounds. Faint at first. A soft rhythmic creaking from somewhere deeper in the building, like an old rocking chair maybe, or a door swaying in a draft. Then a low hum, almost inaudible, like distant machinery or maybe faulty electrical wiring still lives somewhere. But this place was supposed to be dead, no power for decades. And then the whispers. So quiet, I thought I was imagining them. Like snatches of conversation, just at the edge of hearing, carried on the drafts. Couldn't make out any words. Just the sibilant hiss and murmur of voices, coming from everywhere, nowhere. It was impossible to tell. Was it the wind? My own mind playing tricks in the oppressive silence and isolation? Or was it them? The person whose room I'd found? Were they awake? Moving around? Talking to themselves or to someone else? The psychological thriller aspect of it all was intense. I felt trapped, disoriented by the fog outside, and now by these inexplicable sounds inside. Was the building itself making these noises? Or was there a human source unseen, unheard clearly, but definitely present? I spent the entire night huddled in my sleeping bag, headlamp off, just listening. The creaking continued, sometimes closer, sometimes further away. The humming was intermittent. The whispers seemed to ebb and flow with the fog outside. I didn't sleep a wink. Every shadow seemed to move. Every gust of wind sounded like a footstep. The resolution came with the dawn, or rather with the lifting of the fog. As the first weak gray light started to filter through the broken windows, the fog outside began to retreat. And with it, the strange sounds inside the sanatorium seemed to fade. The creaking stopped. The humming vanished. The whispers died away. As soon underscore as it was light enough to see properly, and the fog had cleared enough that I could get my bearings from the mountaintop. I'd packed my gear and got out of Crestview Sanatorium as fast as I could. Didn't go looking for the occupant of that clean room. Didn't want to know. Just wanted to be away from that place. Away from its heavy silence and its whispering echoes. Getting back down the mountain, finding a real trail, seeing other human beings later that day. That was the escape. I was safe. But the experience, it left me with this deep, unsettling feeling. What was real up there, and what was just my fear and the fog playing tricks? Who was living in that abandoned sanatorium? And what were those sounds I heard? Were they just the normal decay of an old building, amplified by my isolation? Or had I truly brushed up against something else? Some hidden life? Some secret purpose? Unfolding in the heart of that forgotten, fog-bound ruin? The questions, like the whispers, still echo sometimes in the quiet moments. My girlfriend Sarah and I, we love backcountry camping. Getting way out there, just us and the wilderness. Last fall, we planned a week-long trip into the Grizzly Peak National Forest, a really remote area known for its rugged terrain and almost no marked trails. We were looking for solitude, a real escape. We found it, and then we found something else. Something that made that solitude feel a whole lot less peaceful and a whole lot more threatening. We'd been hiking for 2 solid days, way off any path, just navigating by compass and topo map. The weather turned nasty on the 3rd day. Cold rain, wind picking up, looked like a real storm was brewing. We were miles from our intended campsite and starting to get seriously worried about exposure. We needed to find shelter, fast. That's when we stumbled upon it, tucked away in a small, hidden valley, almost invisible until you were right on top of it. A small, old log cabin. It looked like a hunter's cabin or maybe an old trapper's lion shack. Very rustic. Weather-beaten logs, stone chimney, small windows. No smoke coming from the chimney. No signs of recent life. Thank God, Sarah breathed, shivering. Maybe we can get out of this rain for a bit? The door was unlocked, just a simple wooden latch. We pushed it open, cautiously. Inside, it was dark, cramped, and smelled of damp earth, old wood smoke, and something else. A faint, musky animal smell. But it was dry. There was a rough stone fireplace, a couple of rickety wooden bunks with what looked like old straw mattresses, a crude table, and 2 stools. Looked like it hadn't been used in years. Okay, I said. Not the Ritz, but its shelter. Let's get a fire going. Dry off. As we started to get a small fire going in the dusty fireplace, thankfully there was some dry kindling tucked in a corner, we began to notice things. Weird things. Things that didn't quite fit the abandoned hunter's cabin vibe. On the rough wooden mantelpiece, instead of old hunting trophies or empty bullet casings, someone had arranged a collection of animal bones. Small ones. Birds, maybe squirrels or rabbits, but they weren't just piled there. They were arranged in these strange, almost geometric patterns. And some of them had weird symbols carved into them. Tiny, spidery marks that didn't look like any language I knew. What do you make of this? Sarah asked, her voice low, pointing to a particularly intricate spiral made of tiny vertebrae. I have no idea, I said, feeling a little prickle of unease. Maybe some previous occupant was just artistic or really bored. But it felt stranger than that. It felt deliberate, ritualistic. Then, on the rough-hewn wooden walls, we started noticing more symbols. Not carved, but drawn in what looked like charcoal or maybe dried mud. They weren't Native American symbols, nothing I recognized from any local history. They were jagged, angular, almost aggressive looking. And they were everywhere, tucked into corners, above the bunks, even a large one drawn on the inside of the cabin door. The musky animal smell seemed stronger now, mixed with the scent of the damp wood and the smoke from our struggling fire. The vibe in the cabin shifted from rustic and a bit creepy to actively unsettling. This wasn't just an old, forgotten hunter's shack. This felt like someone's shrine, or a place used for something else entirely, something that involved bones and weird symbols. Then Sarah found the chest. It was tucked under one of the bunks, a heavy-looking old wooden chest, bound with rusted iron bands. And it was locked, with a big old-fashioned iron padlock. Okay, now I'm officially intrigued, Liam said. No, it was Sarah with me. Sarah said, what do you think is in there? Probably just more old hunting gear, or moth-eaten blankets, I said, trying to sound nonchalant, but my own curiosity was piqued, and a little bit of dread. Given the bones and the symbols, who knew what might be in there? We didn't have tools to break the lock, and honestly, part of me didn't want to. But as we were looking at it, we heard a sound from outside. The storm was really picking up now, wind howling, rain lashing against the small, dirty windows. But this sound was different. It was a branch snapping, loudly, close to the cabin. We both froze, looked at each other. Animal? Sarah whispered. Maybe, I said. Or maybe the wind just brought a branch down, but then we heard it again. Another snap, and then a cough, a human cough. Muffled by the storm, but unmistakable. Someone was outside, right near the cabin. Panic. Cold. Sharp. Panic. We weren't alone out here. And whoever was outside in this storm at this remote, weird cabin, they probably weren't just lost hikers. They were probably connected to this place. To the bones, the symbols, the locked chest, and they probably wouldn't be happy to find us inside their sanctuary. We doused the small fire immediately, kicking dirt, over the embers, plunged the cabin into near darkness, lit only by the faint, gray light filtering through the grimy windows. We didn't speak, just listen. The wind howled, the rain hammered, and then footsteps. Heavy footsteps, squelching in the mud right outside the cabin door. They stopped. Silence. Just the storm. Were they listening? Did they know we were in here? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. Sarah grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. Then, the wooden latch on the door started to rattle. Someone was trying to open it from the outside. We backed away from the door, pressing ourselves into the darkest corner of the small cabin, behind one of the bunks. Held our breath. The latch rattled again, more insistently this time. Then, a heavy thud against the door, like someone kicked it or slammed their shoulder into it. The old wood groaned. This was it. They were coming in. What were we going to do? There was no back door, no other way out. We were trapped. Just as I was bracing for the door to fly open, for figures to burst in, the attempts to open it stopped. We heard muffled voices outside, arguing. It sounded like 2, maybe 3 people. Then the footsteps moved away, receding into the storm, gone, or just moving around to try a window. We stayed hidden, terrified, for what felt like hours. The storm raged on. We didn't hear them again. Eventually, as the first faint hints of gray dawn started to filter through the windows, and the storm began to ease, we dared to peek out. Nothing. No one there. Just the rain-soaked, wind-battered forest. The escape was a desperate, hurried affair. We didn't bother with breakfast. Just grabbed our packs, slipped out of the cabin, and started hiking out fast, constantly looking over our shoulders. We didn't go back the way we came, took a longer, harder route, just wanting to put as much distance as possible between us and that cabin. That was the resolution. Getting away. We never found out who those people were or what was in that locked chest or what the bones and symbols meant. But it wasn't just some eccentric hunter's cabin. It felt like we'd stumbled into something darker, something hidden, something that had its own guardians, its own rituals. It makes you think twice about seeking shelter in unknown places in the deep woods. Sometimes, the storm outside is far less dangerous than what might be waiting inside. And some doors are best left unopened. You ever take a wrong turn on some backcountry road and end up somewhere that just doesn't feel right? Somewhere that's not on any map. And the air itself seems to change. That happened to me last fall. I was trying to drive a scenic route through the Allendale Mountains. It's supposed to be beautiful this time of year. But then this fog rolled in. And I mean fog like I've never seen before. One minute I'm on this winding mountain road. Trees starting to turn color. The next, visibility drops to practically zero. Just this thick, wet, silent gray pressing in from all sides. My GPS went haywire. Phone lost all signal. Classic. I slowed way down. Obviously, heart thumping a bit. Driving blind in the mountains is no joke. After maybe 20 minutes of crawling along at 5 miles an hour, peering through the swirling gray, I saw a turnoff. Just a narrow dirt track. No signpost. Nothing. My map didn't show anything there. But the main road ahead was getting even worse, and I figured, what have I got to lose? Maybe it looped back to civilization, or at least led to a spot where I could wait out the fog. So, I took it. The dirt track wound down into this little valley, the fog somehow even thicker down here, if that was possible. It muffled all sound. After about a mile, the track opened up, and there it was. A town, or what looked like a town. A small collection of houses, a storefront or two, maybe a church steeple barely visible through the mist. It wasn't on my map. Never heard of it, and it was silent. Dead silent. No cars, no people, no dogs barking. Just stillness. And that thick, wet fog clinging to everything. The place looked old, but not derelict. The houses were mostly wooden, simple, but the paint wasn't peeling too badly. Roofs looked intact. Gardens were a bit overgrown, but not completely wild. It was like everyone had just stepped inside a few minutes ago and closed their doors. But there were no lights on in any of the windows, even though it was getting pretty gloomy with the fog. "Hello?" I called out my window, voice sounding way too loud in the quiet. "Anyone around?" Nothing. Just the drip of condensation from the trees lining the main street. I drove slowly down what seemed to be the main street, past a general store, windows dark and dusty. A post office, also dark. The whole place felt paused, like a photograph. And the fog, man, it was playing tricks with everything. Making familiar shapes seem strange, making distances impossible to judge. I started to feel really disoriented. Which way had I come in? Which way was out? All the little side streets looked exactly the same, disappearing into the gray. Then I saw a flicker of movement, just a glimpse at the edge of my vision. Someone, a dark shape, disappearing quickly between two houses. "Hey," I shouted, stopping the car. "Hey, can you help me?" I'm lost. No answer. They were gone. Or maybe I'd imagined it. The fog was so thick. I decided to try and find my way back to that dirt track I'd come in on. But every turn I took seemed to lead to another identical street, another row of silent, watchful houses. The fog felt like it was actively trying to confuse me, to keep me there. I started to feel a real sense of unease, a creeping dread. This wasn't just a lost town. This felt wrong, like a place that didn't want to be found. I passed what looked like a small town square, a little gazebo in the middle, a few empty benches, and on one of the benches someone had left a doll, an old-fashioned porcelain doll, sitting upright, its painted eyes staring blankly into the fog. Its dress was clean, not dusty or like someone had just placed it there. Why? It was incredibly creepy. Then I started hearing sounds, faint, muffled, hard to place. A distant, rhythmic clanging, like a loose shutter in the wind, but there was no wind down here in the valley. A low hum, almost below the threshold of hearing, that seemed to come from the ground itself. And sometimes, what sounded like whispers. Just at the edge of my hearing, too indistinct to make out words, but it felt like hushed voices just beyond the fog. My heart was pounding now. This place was seriously messing with my head. The isolation, the silence, the fog, the weird doll, the strange sounds. It was all too much. I had to get out. I picked a direction, one that felt like it led uphill, back towards where I thought the main road might be, and just started driving. Faster now, not caring if I hit a pothole. The houses thinned out. The fog seemed to lift just a fraction. And then, blessedly, I saw it, the dirt track I'd turned off from. Relief washed over me, so strong my hands were shaking on the wheel. I gunned the engine, tires spinning in the mud, and got back onto that track, heading up, out of that silent, foggy valley. As I climbed, the fog started to thin dramatically. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, I broke through the top layer, back into clear air, though still overcast. I pulled over, stopped the car, got out, just needing to breathe air that didn't feel so heavy, so watchful. Looked back down into the valley. It was completely filled with that thick, impenetrable fog, like a white, silent ocean. No sign of the town at all. Was it even real? Or had I just driven into some kind underscore of bizarre, localized weather phenomenon made me hallucinate a whole town. Getting out of that valley, back onto a road I recognized, that was the escape, the resolution. I had never found that town on any map, never heard anyone else talk about it. But the memory of it, the silence, the fog, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes, the dull, the whispers, it lingers. It makes me wonder, was it a real place, deliberately hidden, cut off from the world for some reason? Maybe the people there wanted to be forgotten, protected by their fog? Or was it something else? Something my mind cooked up out of fear and disorientation? The questions are what stay with you. It makes you think about those blank spots on the map, those remote valleys and forgotten roads. What else is out there, hidden by the fog, just waiting for a lost traveler to stumble in? And do they always let them leave?